Thank you, and good morning. As I just said, I'm Nick Thomas. I'm the Deputy Chief Executive of University Hospitals Plymouth. We're a major tertiary centre for the two counties of Devon and Cornwall. We're a 900-bedded hospital. We spend over £500 million a year. We employ 7,000 staff, and that's probably a high-level backdrop to the work we do. I spoke on the plenary session yesterday about a few of the highlights of the last year, and I just wanted to spend the 10 minutes today going into a little bit more detail, but it will be a bit of a whiz through. So one of the things that happened last year that we're very proud of is we achieved our Scan for Safety accreditation, and that was really important for us because it involved an independent review of the work we'd done. We were able to sign off the things we said we were going to do, and did we actually deliver them. And quite importantly, we were able to get an independent assessment of the financial benefits we delivered. And whilst that wasn't the biggest priority of the work we were doing, what it did do was ensure that we could continue to invest in the Scan for Safety team and the great GS1 work that we're doing to continue that rollout. And it became a very easy business case for us to take through our executive team and through our board to continue to do this great work. The sort of savings that we're talking about, a large chunk of them is about better inventory management, and also through reductions in cancelled operations. On top of that, having put the cash to one side and showed that we could save a significant amount of cash, we were also able to enjoy the non-financial benefits of the time saved. And we'll touch some of that, but that's time savings, whether it's through electronic procurement, whether it's through point-of-care scanning, whether it's through blood tracking, whether it's through, and the list goes on and on. But it was quite important for us, and certainly at a board level, to understand that the investment case for this is not a difficult investment case to make, and I think there's enough evidence out there now that should make it far easier for organisations to adopt these standards than perhaps has ever been in the past, and we'll come back to that towards the end of my 10 minutes. So that highlights some of the savings. And this just gives a highlight of some of the evidence that supports the programme. So the number of procedures we've now scanned, the number of patients that we've scanned, the number of products we've scanned, and so on. It actually shows as well how many orders have been raised electronically without that manual intervention, and it tries to evidence the number of man days that have been saved as a direct result of the adoption of these standards. And there's quite a startling statistic in there, which is about product recall. When we had a product recall in the past, it would take nearly 20 days to recall a product. We've got that down to less than 2 hours now. And these are the sort of high level, or the highlights that really make some of this a real no-brainer in terms of adoption. But as well as being able to continue with the rollout of the work we've started, we've also reset within the organisation 3 new ambitions. So that's to a focus on never events and reducing the number of never events in our theatres, looking at the end-to-end trackability of healthcare events, and I'll come back to talk a little bit more about each of these. And then finally, the use of GS1 standards and RFID to track and trace assets and staff within the organisation and the work we're looking to do there. So if we start with never events, I think Ted Baker used slightly different numbers, but they were in this order. We can see the number of never events in the NHS between April and December 2018. I think Ted's figures were for a whole year 468. We can see the number of never events related to implants, wrong prosthesis, and 21 of those related to hip surgery. So we've been doing a piece of work in order to try and meet this risk within the organisation. The Healthcare Safety Investigation Branch actually said that given the number of incidents within prosthetics, that there was a need for a new national system of scanning prosthetic implants before they're put into patients. So this is a piece of work we've been doing with Genesis, our inventory management solution. And we've been working with Genesis to create some additional checks and balances within the operating theatres to alert clinicians of where there is a mismatch between the scanned procedure that's to be undertaken and the scanned product. So these are screen scrapes. There is actually a demonstration of this going on at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Sophie and Peter in the audience somewhere, they're going to be doing that demonstration of the real system. And initially, it's about to warn surgeons of a wrong side alert. But the next phase will be to capture the same sort of alerts for wrong size and then for wrong material as well. So quite ambitious. It looks very simple. I'm sure it's not as simple as it actually looks on those screens, but an important piece of work for us. That's the timeline. So the prototype is now available. You'll see that. And we're looking to go live in orthopedics later in the summer of this year. Now, the second ambition we've set for ourselves is EPCIS. Now, this goes back to, I stood up in the GS1 conference in Chicago, and I talked about the power of the beep. So I talked about every time we scan something, it tells us a little piece of information about who did what to who, with what, when, and why. When we scan millions, and we have millions of beeps, the potential to harness, or the potential could be harnessed through a repository that allows us to ask questions of those beeps is potentially phenomenal. And I just stood up and talked about this. I'd never heard of EPCIS. I didn't know what it was. But since then, we've been doing a piece of work to look at how this could be more widely adapted. There are many industries and sectors around the world that use this type of technology. It's agnostic to industry and it's agnostic to solutions. Here's an example of how the drug agency use this in the States. Something similar for the fishing industry, where they're able to keep the provenance from the catch to the actual consumption and actually track all the events that happen during the course of that. Same with fruit. And it doesn't take much imagination to think how that could actually translate into the health service. If you took an example, I don't know, if you took an example of an MRI scan, there's probably in excess of 16 things we implant into people that you might want to know about before you actually put them into an MRI scanner. At the moment, if somebody signs that form to say they have one of these implantables, it can take our medical physics team 2-3 days to do all the necessary checks back to what is the implantable, what's the product, what's the version, when was it made, what's the material, and so on. If we actually had a repository where we were able to publish all of these beeps, all of these events that we've scanned from people as they pass through our organizations and put them into a repository that sits outside of our organization and is solution agnostic, then it allows us to write front-end applications which ask questions of that repository. So in the example of the MRI, you could actually have a medical physics app which actually says, tell me everything that's been implanted into this patient, and actually gives you all the material information you need to know to do that medical physics assessment immediately. So that's an example. That's quite a big example. It's quite an ambitious example. We're not starting off with something that ambitious, but we are doing a piece of work within the organization to look at how can we capture those scans, those events into such a repository to track drugs actually from the pharmacy to the ward. So again, this is going to be demonstrated. EPCIS is going to be talked about again. If you didn't get to see the session yesterday, there's another session being run this afternoon, and Richard Price will be there, and Sue will be there as well, who'll be able to answer a lot more of the technical questions about this. It's something we're doing in collaboration with UCL, with GS1, with NHS Digital, and with InterSystems. And we believe it'll be a proof of concept, which, if we can get, which all going well, we will be able to see the potential benefits that go wider and bigger than. Lastly, and there's a timeline for getting the prototype out there. The last ambition is asset tracking. We're, like most big, complex hospitals, we have an awful lot of medical equipment. surgical trays, staff out there, it would be really nice to know where they are at any point in time. And it allows us to organise. One of the things we get every year is, every year we buy more ultrasound machines, and the answer is always, we need an ultrasound machine because we need it for 2 clinics a week, and we don't trust that we can't share it with anybody else, so we need one of our own because we know where it is, and when we need it, it's there and it's accessible. What a great way to be able to share that information and to build confidence that things will be there for people when they need them. That's just the background technology we'll be using. That's the vision of what we're looking to achieve. We're out to procurement at the moment. We're writing the business case during May, and we look to go live this calendar year. So they were the 3 ambitions, but I just wanted to leave with a couple of thoughts, really. If I look back from 17-18 to 18-19, we're seeing very little progress in suppliers adopting GS1 standards. I've put up 2 there. So the one on the left is the smallest implant, your left, is the smallest implantable device that we put into human beings. So that's an eye stent that goes into patients with glaucoma. And it is absolutely minuscule. If you can see the little black fleck on the fingertip, that has a GS1 barcode, which is brilliant. I'd like to know where they put it, but we do have a GS1 barcode on it. That's not true for all, some of the others. If we look at the actual numbers, we probably have a take-up of G-tins of about 30%, and it's from 8% of our supplier base. And I guess I'd just leave with a general observation. If that's the reality and that's the evidence of where we are today, I don't think the ask is of suppliers. It's partly of suppliers, but I think the ask is mainly of the NHS. If we've got all of this evidence and we can see the benefits, what's stopping us adopting it and being more demanding of our supply chain? Because I think then we'll see a massive difference for the NHS and for the patients we serve. Thank you.
You spoke about the RFIDs tracking assets and staff. Have you had any feedback from staff regarding their footsteps being traced around the hospital?
Yeah, so we haven't actually implemented yet, but we've definitely done a lot of work talking to people who have gone down this way. And what people have tended to do is not to put on the staff tracking, but to put on the staff location. So we don't really want to know where people have been or how long they've been there for. What we do want to know is where they currently are, because we need to know they're safe and we need to know when they're available.
Thank you. And do we have any questions in the audience?
Hi Nick, it's Malcolm here from Braun Medical. On your slide, you say you're only getting one supplier's data through from the GDSN. Now, we as suppliers were mandated to put all our data into the GDSN, and I know for at least about 30 of us, it's been in there for the last 2 years. So are you not accessing that, or is there a misconnect as to when you're getting that information from the GDSN?
I'm not an expert on GDSN, so our procurement lead has said there was the one supplier who've actually been right through the process. I don't know if Pete's in the audience who knows more on that, but...
Chair, I'm Judith Mellis from ABHI, and I've heard this statement about suppliers not fulfilling their part of the bargain numerous times throughout this conference. And I think it's important that Frankie and Steve and the e-procurement team get some clarification about where we are in terms of suppliers implementation versus trust implementation, because I think there's a misconception that suppliers are not doing what they're meant to.
Yeah, that may well be the case. But I guess my observation was more, if the NHS becomes a more demanding customer through use of this technology, then I think the market will respond. So I think the ask that the point I'm making is about the NHS. It's not about suppliers per se.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Nick, for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you.